Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of the Livin The Dream video podcast. My name is Rishi Barran. I work at the Dan Patrick School of Sportscasting, and I am really happy about today's guest because he seems like a long lost friend at this point because we've known each other for a while. He was early on in the program, and he has been extremely successful since graduation. That man is Sherwin Shelton. Sherwin, thank you for joining us today.
Thank you. Happy to be here. Honored, humbled, just it's like you say, it's gone by quickly, but it does seem like reunited with a long lost friends. So happy to be here.
Yeah, Sherwin has always been a fan favorite here at the Dan Patrick School of Sportscasting because of his high energy, his positive attitude, and just an all-around good guy. But these days, he's pretty far from Florida, although technically today he is actually joining us from Florida because he's on vacation back home. And by the way, Sherwin, thank you for taking time to do that. But
listen, come on.
He is in North Dakota in Fargo at WDAY-TV, where he is a sports anchor reporter and putting that smiling face out to all the good people of Fargo. So that's fun, Sherwin. I know it's been quite the journey for you to get here, but where did the dream start for you?
The dream started for me as a kid. For some reason, I was enamored with, the on-air personalities. John Madden, growing up as a kid in the 90s, watching him tell the story of football. He was so animated. He would draw on the TV. He'd make cool sound effects, the boom, the flap, the bam. Like, it just, as a kid, it just captivated me. And it made me want to say, maybe one day I can do that. So I love sports. But I was weird. I kind of was a fan of the announcers too. I have, John Madden was one of them. I enjoyed Pat Summerall immensely. He was the perfect straight man to John Madden. He was just even keel all the time. I enjoyed when I got into NASCAR. I enjoyed Mike Joy, who's again same way, just kind of even keel. They were experts. They told you what was going on, and you believed it because they said it. And that just spoke to me. So that's when the dream started. It was just kind of the announcers. They were just so good at their jobs. They made me want to do it too.
The Madden Summerall team is such just kind of a textbook idea of what's important in sportscasting and calling a game, because you mentioned they're very differing personalities. You got Summerall, who kept it really simple. I always used to joke, like he would call a play, it would be like Aikman, Irvin, touchdown. Yep. That's all he would say. Say three words, right?
Yep.
And then you got John Madden, the everyman, colorful personality. Half the time, these analogies he would make, you're like, where is this guy come up with this stuff? But it was that idea of simple and informative mixed with entertainment. And I think that's what every sportscaster hopes to be, someone who can inform and entertain. And you mentioned NASCAR. You were one of the people who's come through our programs, really maybe our first big NASCAR fan. How did you fall in love with that sport, especially with your roots in Florida?
That was a perfect storm, if I could describe it any other way. We had just moved, and we moved over the weekend, and back then cable was a thing. So the cable guy would come between 9 and 5 during the week. It was a Sunday in February, and it was the Daytona 500, the first for Fox. And it was a new home, and they were trying to reach a new audience, and you picked it up on the antenna because that's, I'm old enough to have watched TV on antenna. And I just turned it on because there was nothing else on. And I'm watching this, and it was unfolding where, and it speaks to the whole announcer thing. Darrell Waltrip had just retired. He was in the booth. He was another animated type person. He would say funny things and quote country music and say, do funny things. And that kind of caught my eye. But the way the race played out, it was a driver who had not won in 462 starts, in Michael Waltrip, driving for a new team, his first race with that team. His boss, Dale Earnhardt, was in third. They were going to win that race. And then on the last lap, a crash happened that took the life of Dale Earnhardt, which, if you put it in perspective, that's like the equivalent of Michael Jordan taking a free shot, and that's the last thing he ever did. And so it just captivated me. I'm like, whoa, this is more than just guys going fast and turning left. There's so many things at play here, and I just had to have more. So from that day on, I was hooked, not because a man died, but just because of all the different storylines, all the different things that I didn't know this whole world existed. And from then on, I was hooked.
That's the thing about sports is it's such a mix of emotions. You have the triumph of your team winning. You have the tragedy you mentioned with Dale Earnhardt, but what you just related was there's stories behind all of it. These are people that are competing in the sports. They all have different backgrounds. They all have different lives. How have you imparted really from that race and that day, all the the joy and obviously the agony, but trying to connect with people through your own storytelling?
That it's more than just stats. Everyone knows that there's going to be a winner and a loser, but who are the people behind the face mask, the people behind the bat, the ball? What are these people do? How are they like me? So that's when I'm telling stories in Fargo. We try to do more than just this was the score, this was that. We do a feature show on Sundays called Sports Sunday, and my niche is just kind of finding things that no one knew about. For example, there was this football team, and I was new there. I had gone into this practice, not much of a outline of what was going on. Like, they made the state tournament, and one of the players mentioned that they have team dinners, and the power of the follow-up question. I said, well, tell me more about that. And turns out that the offensive linemen every week, they gather at this team dad's house as a chef, and they have these elaborate meals that they've been doing for weeks and years. It became a tradition. So I go in depth, kind of telling these stories that one would normally get told. Like, you just kind of have to just keep poking around until you find something good. But it's more in depth than just insert score here, insert highlight here. You want to, go, like you say, there's people behind it.
And observing is such a big part of it too, right? You didn't know what you were going to do, but one comment turned into this big story for you. And that's really what a good reporter does. So I'm glad you were able to identify it and go forward with it. All right. So you're into NASCAR, you're into storytelling, you're also into wrestling. I remember Gus Ramsey, I think it might have been your last day. It was one of your last days. And he gave you a wrestling chair, which was still to this day, one of the more cool exits I think anybody's had in our program. But what got you into the wrestling?
God, I've been into wrestling since I was a tiny kid. Growing up in the South, well, Florida's the South, but growing up in Florida, you get Turner, you get TBS, and every Saturday night at 6:05 on Turner was WCW Saturday Night. And it was these larger than life personalities, these like cartoon characters come to life. They were colorful. My personal favorite was Macho Man Randy Savage. Something about him just spoke to me. I forced myself to eat Slim Jims forever, although they're terrible.
They are not terrible. Come on, Sherwin.
They're really not very good. But you know what? Randy Savage sold them, and I'm like, you know what? If the Macho Man likes them, then they're good. But I had to give up because they were just not great. They're just chewy. But anywho, but yeah, it's from a little kid, wrestlers like Sting, Randy Savage. I was never really a Hogan fan. I don't know, just never really did it for me. But I was more of a Sting and Randy Savage, and it enamored me. And then of course, as we progress to the mid 90s and the late 90s, the Attitude Era where it blew up and you get Stone Cold Steve Austin and The Rock. But the very first time I watched wrestling, I remember it was it was like 1990. And yeah, it just spoke to me. And since then I've been hooked.
All that entertainment that you took, sounds like you had a fun time growing up because you latched onto all these things that made you smile. What else did you take from growing up in Florida that you think has been impactful in your life?
That's a great question. With the weather the way it is in Florida, you spend a lot of time outside in the summers, and it teaches you to meet random kids in the neighborhood and kind of make friends, make nice. And I attribute myself as a person that can get along with anyone. And just I say it taught me social skills. Like, okay, I don't know this kid, but let me meet him. Let's find out something about him. We have common ground somewhere. and then you make friends. So I mean, just those summers, because yeah, your parents would kind of lock you out in the summers, be like, well, go play. You're not gonna be in front of the TV all day. You're gonna be outside because that's TV's bad for you. Although I did watch a ton of TV growing up. But anywho, but yeah, it kind of taught you to go outside and make friends, and that was something I still do today. I consider myself to be an outgoing person. I like people, and I like to interact and mingle.
Well, you end up going into high school, Stoneman Douglas High School. Unfortunately, it's come into the news, in the past decade or so for tragedy. But when you were there, it was a time for you to develop and become a great person growing up. At that point, where was your mindset in terms of where your career was heading?
That's a good question. So in high school, sophomore year, I got a job. I started working at McDonald's, and I put a lot of my energy and time into that and got really good. So next thing I know, I'm a 17-year-old shift manager. So McDonald's kind of became my core focus. I didn't think about school. I told myself I'd take some time off. I'm like, oh, I'll take a year or two off, and it didn't happen. I worked my way up. I was a store manager by the time I was 20. I think it happened. I got promoted like the week before my 20th birthday. So I was literally 19 years old, in charge of a $2.5 million business. I should not have been in charge of a $2.5 million business at the age of 19. You don't have the leadership skills at 19 to be in charge of people twice your age and handle all that responsibility. But somehow I managed. The book of Michael Scott. But somehow I managed. But so my life focused around McDonald's. So the next, so I started there. It would have been 20 years ago, because I started at McDonald's March 1st of 2003. I eventually ended up leaving it fully on and off of 2020, but before Full Sail, it was 2003 to 2018. So that is what?
15 years.
15 years?
Yeah.
Yeah. So it was a fast 15 years that went by in a blink of an eye. But again, I took so much from there. I learned how to be a leader. I learned how to talk to people, work with people, build a team, lead a team. But yeah, so my career, it changed. It switched to McDonald's because that was at the forefront, and that's what I did. I just worked my way up, and yeah.
How were you able to make such an impression as a 17-year-old to be thrust into that role? Because I can tell you, I worked at McDonald's. That was my first job other than being a paper boy. And they wouldn't even let me off the grill, Sherwin. So how did you move up to management as a 17-year-old?
It was, that's a great question. In the beginning, it was kind of like with NASCAR. I needed to know more. I had a thirst to be good. I wanted to learn every position. They had these books. They were the quality assurance guides, where it had every time and temperature in it, like so-and-so meat cooks for this time, it cooks at this temperature. I memorized that thing. And I knew everything about the restaurant. So that, and I was dependable, reliable. I showed up 30 minutes before every shift and just kind of waited to clock in. It was kind of a running joke, like, is Sherwin okay? It's 30 minutes before his shift. He's not here yet. That didn't happen very often. I was always early. But yeah, I had this thirst, and I just needed to learn more, do more. And it showed in my work. And it was noticed. I remember one of my bosses came up to me. I think I was 17 at the time. So there was always like this age restriction. Like, to be a crew trainer, you had to be at least 16. I started when I was 15, so I had to wait till I turned 16. To be a manager in training, you had to be 17 years old. And to be a manager, you had to be 18. So the owner made an exception, an exception for me. She's like, all right, well, I hear so much about this guy, this kid, what makes him so good. I'm going to go find out and talk to him. So I'm working one day, the drive-through, and her name was Brenda Wells. She comes in, and they're like, Brenda wants to talk to you. I'm like, what? Why? Like, what did I do something wrong? So as I'm working the drive-thru, she's having this conversation with me. We talked for, I don't know, briefly 15, 20 minutes. The whole time she called me Sheldon. I was too scared to correct her. I mean, she always called me Sheldon. But when she left, one of the other managers came up to me and goes, "What'd you say to her?" I'm like, "I don't know why." She goes, "We need to make that kid a manager like today." So I don't remember the conversation because I was so nervous. But I guess it was answer your original question. I understood respect. That it wasn't just something that was given with a title. You kind of have to get it to give it. Being younger than these people, I understood that I needed to be respectful. And I would treat people the way I want to be treated. And I wouldn't ask anyone to do something that I wouldn't myself do or had myself done. But yeah, I was 17 years old, and a week later, and this is something that never happened with anyone else, you had to be certified to become a manager. Usually it was done by a supervisor, but he was on vacation. So again, the owner, Brenda, she herself certified me, and I had always been deemed as the one because I was certified by Brenda Wells, the owner, and no one else kind of got that honor. Yeah, and that's how I became a manager at the age of 17.
Well, good thing you didn't correct her for saying your name wrong. That might not have gone as well, right?
I think I tried to, but words didn't come out. I was like, shit.
All good. Well, one thing that people who have not worked in fast food may not realize is how difficult a job it can be. And that was your advent into deadline pressure. Because I tell you what, there's one thing to have a news director that's yelling at you to get your story in. But when you got a building full of 50 people who are waiting on their food, that is much more terrifying. So how did early experiences in fast food help you now with deadline pressure?
That's, it's different. Yes. The pressure goes from being always looming to it becomes singularly focused. It's like you say, having a rush of people come in and having to get all those customers out and having to do so because there's more customers on the way. Like if you don't get these people out, then the people that are coming soon, because it's an ever moving thing, then it just kind of log jams and stacks up. It taught me that there's a time where you can relax, but when it's go time, it's go time. And you need to just power through until, at the end, then you can relax again. But it kind of taught me that when it's time to go, it's time to go. And it needs to happen now.
We're talking to Sherwin Shelton. He is a sports reporter and anchor for WDAY-TV in Fargo, North Dakota. But in 2018, Sherwin Shelton was a regional. What kind of manager did you work your way up to?
I was a general manager. I was a store manager. Yes.
Store manager at McDonald's. And at that point, I don't know that you thought you would be in North Dakota wearing a shirt and tie and doing sports. So how did you make that transition?
I just recently turned 30, and I don't know if that was my midlife crisis, quarter life crisis. I don't know. But I felt like I needed to do something different. And it was an off day. And God bless the algorithms of Facebook or me not clearing my cookies. But there's an ad that popped up for this program that was starting, the Dan Patrick School of Sportscasting. I'm like, well, what's this? So I click on it. It hadn't started yet because this was in December of 2017. So I click on it and I find out more about it. I get in contact with the great people at Full Sail. And like, well, we have this thing called Behind the Scenes that's coming up. Why don't you go to it? I said, sure. It happened that I believe I was on vacation or going to be on vacation that week. Or maybe I just took the weekend off because it was always on a Sunday. So I think I took the weekend off, spent some time with my buddy Josh, who lives in Orlando. And then I came to the behind the scenes. It was the first one for the program. Gus wasn't there, so I didn't meet Gus until later. Josh was there. Josh
Mora.
Josh Mora was there. And another gentleman who I had never seen after, he was there as well. Whose name I can't remember, but he was super nice. They were both so nice. We did the exercise where, you're the reporter and at the desk and you're tossing to someone, and you're outside a Lambeau Field. And just, being in that studio, seeing the prompter, seeing, the desk, I knew that I had to be here. And I made a decision as I was driving back to my buddy's house. I'm like, okay, I need to make this happen. So I gave notice at my job, got rid of my apartment, moved in with my best friend Josh, and the rest is, as they say, history.
That's a big decision to make because you had a good job. You had been very successful there. But then there's this dream, and we talk about chasing dreams. And as much as it sounds like you were passionate about your job, you loved it, but I don't know if your dream was to manage McDonald's and be the general manager there. What propelled you to take that leap of faith and go after something that maybe you saw as a job that you would enjoy more?
I had always just kind of did the next thing because it was the next thing. So it's like, oh, well, do you want to be a manager? Well, yeah, sure, because that's what I'm supposed to do. Is it more money? Yeah, sure, okay. I'm not doing it for the money, but yeah, it's the next thing in line. And then I realized that, because I told myself again, I'll take some time off of school. 4 years turned into 15, and I asked myself, like, what is it that I really want to do? I love sports. I love television. I love sports television. I love entertainment. And then, like I said, that ad was there. And I don't want to say I was at a stagnant point, but things had gotten different from when I started to where I was. The advent of 24 hours, the advent of just trying to. McDonald's was, and rightfully so, when you want to be a conglomerate, or you are a conglomerate, you take on all these different avenues, and the business became so complex. And that was right about the time where it became hard to find employees. It just wasn't the same. People weren't looking for those jobs anymore. People didn't want to work those jobs anymore. It became harder to run the business. That was not to say it was easy, but it became tougher to manage. And we were meeting those challenges 100%. But the love was fading. And I wanted something I could be completely passionate about. And it took me back to my childhood. I'm like, all right, well, this ad popped up. I went to behind the scenes, like, this is it. This is what I've been looking for. And yeah.
And if you didn't go after it, you wouldn't be where you are now. And you're just getting started, my friend. You're just getting started. So that's the exciting part, because you bring so much to the table that I think, as a viewer, like me, as your instructor, it was clear at the start, this guy is engaging. This is a very likable guy. And that's important to an audience, because if you're watching somebody and you think that person is horrible, like a horrible person, now there is another side to that. There are some people who get their clicks and by their, let's just say, colorful opinions that they have, which may or may not be authentic. We know that there's people like that out there, but that's not Sherwin. And Sherwin is genuinely a likable person. And you brought that likable personality to us. Now you're there. What were your first impressions?
First impressions of Full Sail?
Yeah, Full Sail, and no, let's keep it to Full Sail for now.
Okay.
Full Sail and the Dan Patrick School.
It was wow, because so the first impressions, I don't know if it's still done, but the very first week, the new enrollees, we met with Gus in some random classroom, and we just kind of had this rap session.
Still doing it now?
Okay, cool. So meeting Gus for that, I don't know, 20, 25 minutes. One thing about Gus Ramsey, he somehow, he knows how to command a room, control a room. Maybe that's because of his 20 plus years running rooms at ESPN. I don't know, but he just kind of controls the room. And we got to a point where we were telling stories, or he started telling stories about Stuart Scott. He told a story about working in Orlando with him, which of course added credibility right away, because Stu Scott's a legend, and this guy worked with him. This guy knows him. Like, this is crazy. And he told the story about how they were hanging out and he wanted to get pizza, and Stu was like, "Oh yeah, we'll get pizza." And they go to Pizza Hut, and Stu orders a pizza without like sauce, crust, or without sauce or cheese, and Gus is like, well, what are you doing? He's like, oh, I don't like pizza, but you wanted to get pizza, and then, that's fine. We're hanging out. But just the fact I'm like, wow, this guy has a wealth of knowledge. He's credible, and he's just cool. I'm glad this guy's lead this program because he just seems like an excellent person. And then, you go through your first few classes before you get to intro to sportscasting, which is another time to mingle and kind of network. I happened to start, so I took the extended route, and the group that kind of was my first group, these two people that were with me when I got to intro to sportscasting, Trent Osborne, Sam Guzman, they were like the first, people that the three of us kind of got along real well. And we went through a few classes together. And those two, so talented. It kind of made me think or wonder, like, oh crap, am I good enough? Just because the level of talent they had. At like Trent, he would do highlights without a shot sheet. He would just react to it on the screen. I'm like, well, what? And he was super good, so good.
Well, you developed that friendship with Trent Osborne and Sam Guzman early on. How did that help you to kind of bring your game to the next level?
It let me know that I had to step it up. Not that I wasn't bringing it 100%, but I had to go 105%, 110% because they were that good. Naturally that good. I know I'm charismatic. I know I have talent, but those two just showed me that, okay, this is real. This is it's not a competition because it's more like a family, but you do realize that you have to perform. And they let me know that, okay, it was a healthy competition. Like, all right, we're going to see who's going to steal the show this day, who's going to steal the show tomorrow. And just the talent those two brought to the table was amazing.
So you were one of our first extended program students. Mm-hmm. What was that journey like for you to go between different groups and really spend time with a lot of different students?
It was a gift and a curse because, one, again, the competitiveness, well, they're going to finish before me. Or I'm quote unquote falling behind. I'm not. I'm on a different path. But that was the bad part of it, or just your ego gets bruised, which is fine. The good part is, like you say, you meet I got to meet and become friends with and work with so many different people, so many different groups, from Sam and Trent to the frat pack, which was infamous, but
I had cool. You in the frat pack. Yeah, you had
yes, you did
in that class. Yeah,
to I don't know if this group has a name, but the group with James and Lakia and Ben and JD, just that group. I know Ben and I had some classes together, and then I just became a drifter. I just kind of would just drift along and meet new people. And there were a few months I was by myself, which is kind of cool as well. So it was a cool experience because while they had the same core group and most people just kind of go together, like I was with so many different people, and they're people who I still talk to today. It was a great experience.
What would you say to someone who had to make that decision today for either extended program or the traditional program, kind of the pros and cons of taking the extended route?
I would say, one, don't get discouraged. You're going to finish. It's because there's a stretch where you just take one class and it kind of just starts to drag a little bit, and then toward the end it ramps up. There are no cons. I mean, it's an ego thing. It's a con, but you get to focus solely on one thing, and be really good at it. Put your 100% into this one class, and like just use that as a time to just hone your craft and just get ready, because it's gonna get more immersive. But yeah, there were no cons. It's just all ego. It was all my ego. Because I'm like, man, because I think I was student number 13 in the program. And as more came in, you you just kind of see them, okay, well, they're in this class now, and they kind of leap over, and it's like, well, what's going on here? But again, it's all ego.
Well, that's why we gave you the Lifetime Achievement Award by the end, right?
That is true, yes.
Weren't you doing some work at McDonald's during that time too?
I was still working part-time, which was kind of the thing of why I chose the extended. It allowed me to still work part-time. It allowed me to live further away from campus, because that was one of the deals. Like if you're doing extended, you aren't helped with housing, which is cool. I had housing. It was 90 minutes away, but still easier, more affordable, and I was able to work part-time just to still, take care of bills and whatnot. But yes, I was still working part-time, and during the pandemic, I kind of switched to full-time, which kind of came back to bite me, because we were all online, and then, oh wait, we're coming back to campus. Like, oh no. But yeah, it allowed me to work, and it just allowed me some freedom that I needed to kind of keep doing what I was doing.
And you just brought up an interesting point, was that you were with us so long that you were there from pretty much the beginning to when COVID hit, through COVID to past COVID. So what were all of those experiences like for you?
In the beginning, great. COVID hits, the world just kind of stopped and stood still. I was in Mike Tuck's class, and as it was getting closer and closer, he's like, yeah, I don't know, because we had met in person once or twice for class. And then Rudy Gobert touches the mics. And then, that's it. It all shut down after that day. And it's a 3-week period that felt like 3 months. There was nothing going on. We did Gus was cool enough to do all those Zoom meetings we had each day to kind of keep us engaged. But it was tough during the COVID era, because you just kind of felt unmotivated. You kind of felt like, what's going on? Like, what's going to happen? You were used to interacting with people, going to classes, having discussions. It's now all online. You're just sitting in front of a computer screen. You're isolated. It was tough. And I remember one of the ILs, someone asked, and I remember I spoke up. I'm like, yeah, it's hard now. It can get a bit demoralizing, and it was a real struggle in the very beginning of COVID. And as we got more used to it, it became better. But the very beginning, tough. As we powered through, it kind of became the new normal, and you kind of got used to it. And it was cool. Being in class from home, it was cool. I missed the interaction. I missed going to class. Although it was a 90-minute drive, I didn't care. I loved going to campus so much. And then toward the end, when slowly getting back, another new normal with masks and the social distancing, but it was okay because I was back inside the building, back inside the studio. And yeah, it was kind of a bummer not having a traditional graduating online, but again, it was still cool to be able to finish the way it started, at least.
Yeah, and if you want to come back for graduation, you still can. So that door's still open for you.
It's funny you say that. I had planned to. I bought plane tickets, and I was going to, and then I got the job in Fargo, and I had to change plans.
How about that? Well, I guess that was all worth it. And
it was all worth it.
One thing you developed through your time with us was you really found Sherwin, right? Your personal voice in your work. I still remember back, and I'm sure I can find the video of this. We when you were with the frat pack, and you did this story. I think it was Kyle Busch, it was one of the Busch brothers, and you did this. There was like assignment 3. You had to do like a tease and then a lead and a VO, and you just did an amazing job. And I was like, I used it for the example for 1 month, but then I said, Sherwin, you're wearing this horrible Ghostbusters shirt. I can't use it. You look so unprofessional.
July 4th, 1984. Richard Petty won his 200th career race at Daytona. People thought no one would ever win that many again. 303 days later, Kyle Busch was born. 34 years, 8 months, and 14 days later, something truly amazing has happened. Kyle catches the king.
But you found your voice, and then you brought that back after COVID with your little Deion Sanders thing you did in your. Basically, what he did is he did a weekend update show.
Weekend Update, Sports Edition, with Elijah Balcarcel and Sherwin Shelton.
Weekend Update, Sports Edition, something like that.
That's exactly what it was.
How much fun did you have diving into who you were through your writing and your presentation?
It was so much fun. To go back to the Ghostbusters shirt, you had mentioned, you were like, oh, maybe I didn't see it because it wasn't a final. I assumed that, oh, you didn't have to. But I never made that mistake again. I never wore the wrong clothes again after that day. Because you're right. I killed that assignment, but I was wearing that Ghostbusters shirt. You know, I always consider myself to be funny. I laugh at my own jokes, and I love making other people laugh. And to kind of put that personality into my work so that someone else gets a chuckle out of it, it's awesome. And I've always tried to do that. I've always tried to. I remember in intro to Sportscasting, I did hockey, and I put Russian in my script because that was the year that OV and the Capitals won the cup. So yeah, it's I get a kick out of it. Maybe I'm just doing it to make myself laugh, but if other people get some joy out of it too, that's just an added plus. Yeah, I still try to do it now. Although my boss told me that my stuff's a little too cute sometimes, which is fine. You gotta, abide by the guidelines set by your employer. I don't suggest trying to push something through that, doesn't really need to be pushed through. But yeah, I love getting a little kick out of that. If someone chuckles or laughs, that's an added bonus.
Prime numbers, Sherwin. Remember that prime
That's right.
numbers. That's what we talk about, memorable moments.
But to answer your question, the first thing I'm going to do is change all numbers to prime numbers.
Prime numbers?
That's right, Eli. 2, 3, 5, 7, 11, 13, 17, 19, 21, of course, 23, 29, 31.
21 isn't a prime number.
It's not a prime number, but it's prime's number.
I agree. Like you got to do it. You got to do it your job, but at the same time, don't let that stifle you because you're working on where you're headed, right? So keep those memorable moments coming. And
Optimus Prime was the offensive coordinator or the defensive coordinator.
Yes, that was one. I won't lie. That was one of my favorite finals that I ever got a chance. Very creative, very well done on every level. So before I get to now, let's just dive in for a moment into your interesting situation you had when you were entering the job market. So Sherwin got into the job market, but it didn't quite go as planned. Do you want to share a little bit about that experience due to the housing?
Yeah, so I graduated during COVID and there weren't very many jobs out there, and you kind of were at the mercy of who would call you back. And I got called back by a station in Alpena, Michigan, out of the 210 or 12 media markets. Alpena is, I believe, 209 or 208. So very small market. Great place for a great first job. I was, and I would, the advice I would give is don't accept the first thing you get because you really want it. I didn't do the research of finding housing. So I accept this job, I accept the contract, I fly out to Alpena, Michigan and kind of trying to find a place to live. And that's when I realized there are no places to live. There's a waiting list months long, and it's just the way the community works is that it's very tiny and the people who live there and there aren't very many new people. So yeah, I could not find a place to live and I had to respectfully say, hey, listen, I can't be homeless and employed, so I can't come work here. So yeah, that was opportunity number one that came, and I was like, oh wow, this is gonna be great. Oh,
Well, you have graduated since then to a couple of jobs, including your on-air role right now, and that brings us to our next big question: what's it like living the dream now for you, Sherwin?
It's hard to put into words. just the joy that you get doing something that you always wanted to do, something that you didn't think was maybe ultimately possible. Sometimes it doesn't feel like work. There are times it does, but sometimes, like, you know what? Like, I get to cover games for a living and be paid for it. I get to, this game that people love so much, whether it be football, baseball, basketball, like it's a game, and you are employed to report on it, find stories on it. It's great. Every day I go into the office, I go in with a big smile. There are no me dreading to go to work. Now, weather-wise, that's different. There are days where it's like, oh, it's -15 outside. I dread that. But there were days. It's slowly becoming spring in Fargo, I've heard. But yeah, there are no. At the end of the day, there are no bad days because you're being paid to do something that very few people get to do, and it's pretty much all about joy. Yeah, sure, there's always winners and losers. Someone's team's going to lose, but there's always joy in sports for the most part.
Sherwin had to work to get there, though. It didn't just happen for him after the Alpina thing didn't work out for him. He did what several of our graduates did, which was take a job behind the scenes, and what several of our graduates have done in news. And fortunately for him, he got an opportunity at the right time, right after the Alpina thing, to go to KRCG-TV in Columbia, Missouri, to be a news producer. And he did that for a period of time. Sherwin, what did you take from that job that helped you understand the culture of the newsroom better?
That, and it kind of goes back to my McDonald's days. Respect, be respectful, because you're going to find yourself in situations where there's 40-year veterans there, where there's people who've been there forever, new people, because the newsroom is always a few dichotomies. You have your lifers, you have your people just passing through, and then you have your people that have been there for a few years who kind of decided to make that their life in that city. I learned that the newsroom is it's an episode of The Office that's not 22 minutes long. It's the exact same things you go through that you see on the show, but it's just real life situations. Someone's gonna, mess up the microwave. Like there's all these things. It's a long episode of The Office, and you just kind of you go through each day and you cope, and there's fun days, there's not so fun days, there's breaking news days, there's sad news days. But at the end of the day, it becomes pretty much your family, because for the most part, you're in this new town that you've moved to from wherever you're from to take this job, and the people there become your family in that town. They're the only people in that state, city, town, etc. So it would behoove you to build relationships with them, and my time there taught me to build relationships, be open-minded, listen. There's so much knowledge in that newsroom. For example, Kermit Miller, I think he just celebrated his 41st year at KRCG, a wealth of knowledge. And he's not a type of person that would, he's a silent leader. He's not gonna say, hey, listen, you did this way, do it that way. He'd probably just rewrite it, and you learn from that. Like, you would learn from what he would do. He led by example. And just, always keep your eyes open, because those little things, if you miss those, you're missing information. And I would also say to someone that it's okay for your first job to not be, on air. It's okay to take that news producer job, because there are lessons to be learned, whether it be on reporting, whether it be on accuracy of content, accuracy of stories, whether you have to get something confirmed first. Sure, you want to be first, but you want to be right. Whether it be the way you need to lay out a story, beginning, middle, end, put the big facts up first because you need to catch your audience. The way you write things, like the way you write teases, or no one really calls them bumps in the business, but the way you write those as well. They don't call them bumps in news, but
everywhere calls things different, so it just depends on where you work.
Yeah, the first time I heard VOB, I'm like, what's the VOB? It's a VOSOT. But I'm like, VOB, what's that? But yeah, just it's okay for your path that everyone wants their path to be a straight line, but it's okay to take that circuitous route to be winding road. You're gonna get there eventually. It's not always a straight line. Very rarely is it a straight line. So I would say take that job if that's what presents itself to you, because you're gonna learn.
So if your newsroom was an extended episode of The Office, did you have a Kevin? I want to know that. Do you have a Kevin in there?
There might have been two Kevins. There might have been two Kevins. Someone doing a job that they probably shouldn't be doing because the story of Kevin is that he applied for the warehouse, but Michael hired him as an accountant. Yeah, there were a few of those. I'm not going to name names, but there were some Kevins.
We'll leave it at that. We'll see who had the tissue shoe boxes for shoes, right? Then you will know who it is. Right?
Yeah.
But you mentioned, you and Sam. You mentioned Sam Guzman earlier. He did the same thing you did. He took a news producing job. He is now also on air. What aspects from that part of it, producing, have helped you as a sports anchor?
It helps you better build your shows. You know about timing. You know about what to do if something breaks or is breaking. It helps you knowing behind the camera, knowing how because every newsroom uses different software, whether it's iNews or ENPS or whatever. Getting to know that first, because you'll get to know really well as a producer than as a on-air talent, because you're spending a little maybe less time in there. But the better you are at building your skeleton, your show, your block, the faster you become at that, the more time you can spend on other things. So it kind of it's the building blocks. That's the foundation. Once you build that real strong foundation with that, getting familiar with the newsroom system, everything else becomes so much easier. Because it's stressful when you're going out shooting highlights. If you're not proficient in that, you're going to spend time putting this together, and then next thing you know, it's a block before you're supposed to be on, and you're not done. So.
Well, Sherwin Shelton is now a sports reporter anchor at WDAY. That's easy to remember. Day, yeah. Right? WDAY. Is that what you call yourself?
WDAY. People do all the time, yeah.
But you are now on air, working full-time on air. How fulfilling is it now, after kind of the juggling you had to do to get there, to now have that smiley mug on TV every day?
So when I made the decision to find an on-air job, I was pleasantly surprised by the options that I had. The options that were presented to me was humbling. And I said to myself, well, wow, this is going to be a possibility. Fast forward to now, it's still humbling. Sometimes I don't believe it, like one day I'm going to wake up and be like, oh, okay, well, this makes sense. It was all a dream. It's fulfilling. There's no better feeling than finding a story from beginning and telling that person's story, telling something that was unknown, and the finished product, something that was just an idea, a sentence, became this finished product, and seeing it and being proud of it is, I don't have children, but it's kind of like watching your children grow up, what I assume. I had a Tamagotchi in middle school, and I didn't kill it a lot. So, The Sims, when your Sim doesn't die, it's that feeling, watching your Sim, get married and have children. That's what it's like.
I definitely have not had that answer before on that. So good stuff. You were telling me earlier before we recorded that you have this kind of weekend showcase show you do, and that you contribute some really good stories to it. What's your process for going through those stories to really make them stand out?
You want to find out something that's it's topical, but also evergreen. So if it's the soccer season, you want it to be on something soccer, but you don't want it to be about, well, so-and-so's playing so-and-so this week, because that's nothing. That's just a one-time deal. That can't run ever again. Doesn't tell you anything. So for example, before I left for vacation, I did a story on a soccer coach who came over from England. He had this crazy story, and the reason I kind of wanted to do that because I had interviewed him at the beginning of the season, and he kind of just said something in passing. I mean, he has an accent, so it's normal. Me being me, I make a Ted Lasso joke, and I'm like, "You're like a reverse Ted Lasso. Instead of coming from the U.S. to coach soccer, and you did it the opposite way." And he told me a bit of his story, and I wanted to know more. He had come over from England. He was a professional player. He injured his leg and then switched to coaching. After being a coach in the U.S. for a while, he had to go back because his green card expired, leaving his fiance and dogs behind, and then having to be away from them for a while and coming back. And then when he's back, he can't work yet because that thing's not finalized. Like, there was just so many layers to the story that I felt had to be told. So my process is kind of just setting an interview, and then, Mike Tuck will tell you this, having your questions and have follow-up questions. But when someone's talking, you kind of have to just listen real good, because they'll say something and you got to be ready to follow up. You're like, well, tell me more about that. What's that going on? You know what I'm saying? And you'll find yourself doing that and not talking about the X's and O's. You're just talking about the people involved, because everyone has a story. They're not all sob stories. They're not all, I overcame this and now I play soccer with only 9 toes. But there's always a story of triumph, tribulations, hardships. There's always a story of people, overcoming something, or something that wasn't known, a fun fact that can turn into, a story. So my process, you just got to keep listening and be ready with the follow-up. And sometimes a follow-up is just why, or, it's closed-ended, but tell me more about that,
Yeah, that's such good advice for everybody. And look, I don't know a lot about North Dakota, but I do know that they win a lot of football games at ND State, and that they've had a lot of great quarterbacks come into the NFL, some more successful long-term than others, some that may
Very true.
be on the field longer than others. But what's the coverage like for you in terms of what you focus on?
So WDAY, they have the broadcast rights for NDSU. So we actually have a second department that, they'll do the play-by-play. We'll broadcast those games. So I don't cover a lot of NDSU because they handle that. It's the department of it's our live events department that takes care of that. I mostly cover University of North Dakota, UND, which is about 90 minutes north. They're a little less known. They're more known for hockey. The UND hockey is tops in the country. They've won many championships. They're top notch. I knew they were big because on that Mighty Ducks Game Changers show on Disney Plus, Josh Duhamel was wearing a UND hockey sweater. I'm like, whoa, they're a big deal. Like, people told me it was a big deal. I knew it was a big deal when it was on Disney Plus. But I cover a lot of UND, and then it's local high school sports. There is a rich history of high school sports in North Dakota, because they don't have pro teams. They don't have, so the only show in town is the high school sports. So Fargo's on the border of Minnesota, so they care about the Vikings, they care about the Timberwolves, but they care more about what's going on locally. We're a local first station.
So how do you take high school coverage and make it interesting, engaging for people who might not know the players and the teams?
That's a great question. And that all goes back to whether it be the story of a player, like highlighting this player. Well, they tore their ACL last season. It was a long road back, and it makes them care about that person, which in turn makes them care about the game. Again, it's so funny that because when you're watching NFL coverage, it's about the wins and losses. It's really not about the stories. It's about the Cowboys and the Giants. It's about, the Bears and the Packers for you. Hopefully with Aaron Rodgers leaving, the Bears are under new ownership now.
Yeah, good. Oh, come on, man. Yeah, good days are ahead.
I'm sorry. Yes, good. Nothing but clear skies. But yeah, so you got to figure out that it's more than just wins and losses. Now you'll have during your football season, we do a football show where it is just highlights, because there's so many games happening, and you need to tell the story. You need to tell the highlights of those games. But for the most part, during the week, when it's not, just the football show, you want to make people care. And you tell the stories of the players or, the coaches, because coaches have good stories too. So yeah, it's about telling the stories rather than just telling the score.
I'm curious because I could see this happening really easy for you there. Have you become like local celebrity Sherwin Shelton now?
No, not so much. And that could just be me because I don't go anywhere to be recognized. when the weather gets really cold, I'm gonna be honest, it's hard to leave the house. But one time I DoorDashed and I go out to get my food and he's like, aren't you on TV? I'm like, oh yeah. Oh, you do a good job, man. Keep up the good work. Oh, all right, thanks, man. So I got recognized by my DoorDash delivery driver, which I mean, that's top notch, I suppose.
Was that kind of a full circle moment from when you were in the food business to I used to be the guy that's recognizing the celebrity. Now I'm the celebrity.
Yes, but the level of celebrity that I am and the first celebrity I ever saw are two different levels. I was one time Lawrence Taylor came into my store that I was, and it was such a weird moment. I had my back to the front counter and one of my employees walks up and he just stops in his tracks like he's seen a ghost. And he just utters, oh, you're LT. I'm like, yeah, whatever. And I turn around and there's LT. And I'm like, whoa. And he was just trying to get his breakfast and he didn't want a big deal made out of it. And he kind of just gestures like don't make a big deal. And I'm like, yes, sir. And I just get his food because you don't want to piss off LT.
No.
Yeah, I don't want no part of that. So, and I don't think he was wearing the lightning bolt earrings. I think it was an off earring day for him, but that was, that was a big difference, but yeah, I would say it was full circle. But it also let me know that what I'm doing is resonating, because if it wasn't, he wouldn't care about who that was or recognize me that I was doing it.
Yeah, it makes a bigger impact than you might think on people. So that's awesome. Well, that leads me to the next final big question. Where do your dreams lead you now? What are your next big dreams for what's to come for this young man, Sherwin Shelton?
I don't know about young man, but it's hopefully to warmer pastures. No, Fargo is great. It's just really cold. I would love to eventually maybe end up with NASCAR, covering NASCAR. It's still a big passion of mine. Yeah. There's actually a pretty good dirt racing scene in North Dakota. And whenever it, warms up, I'll be able to sink my teeth into that. But I would love to either on a national level, maybe even on a beat level where I myself is, just traveling around. But I would love to end up covering NASCAR. I mean, the play-by-play guys have to retire at some point. Maybe I could dream job end up being the play-by-play for NASCAR on Fox if Mike Joy ever decides to call it a career and I'm in the right place at the right time. But yeah, I would love either pit reporting or just, kind of getting back into that NASCAR world that I love so much that I've kind of been, away from for a little bit.
I still
and I say,
go ahead.
No, and as I say that, WWE is still a big passion of mine. So I don't, going the strictly entertainment route. That's something I could do as well. Like I would love to, what I do is fun, but I think it'd be loads of fun just to, whether it be WWE or NASCAR, that would be end game goal for me for sure.
Well, we're going to go with that theme here with what I call the dream sequence to cap things off today, which is basically quick answer, stream of consciousness stuff. And we're gonna lean a little bit on your NASCAR and wrestling love. So okay. My first one for you is, what is your dream race car?
Ooh, dream race car. So it would be the early 2000 era Cup Series car. It was so cool. Preferably the Chevy Monte Carlo. It had the fender flares, the spoiler was just so cool. The lines on the car were great. It was just super fast. And at that time, Chevy was doing all the winning. So that car, the way it sounded on the big racetracks, it kind of just screamed as it, a big pack at Daytona. Oh yeah, that for sure. The early 2000 era Cup Series car, preferably Chevy Monte Carlo.
All right. Dream wrestling tag team. And I want to say that it does not have to be an actual tag team. You could put any two people together you want.
Ooh. You know, my love of Randy Savage will have him be tag team partner number 1. Number 2. See, they actually had matches together as a tag team. But so we won't choose Sting. We can choose. You know, I really loved also Eddie Guerrero. And their two styles, I think, would match up very well together. The Randy Savage would probably have to distract the ref with his over-the-top antics. And while he has the ref distracted, Eddie Guerrero would come in and with some cheating involved, whether it be a low blow or maybe a chair shot that no one else would see. So I think those two would work really well together. Randy Savage and Eddie Guerrero would probably be a tag team. You probably would be hard to beat.
Can't have entertaining wrestling without cheating. Make that.
No, you have to.
Right?
You have to.
Yeah.
Yeah. No way you could.
Finally, dream interview. I know you got to interview my buddy Ross Chastain well before the Hail Melon while you were at Full Sail. But who's your dream interview?
I'd like a redo on that one for sure. I was super nervous and excited and talking 150 miles an hour, which I tend to do when I get a little excited. Dream interview. I would love to sit down and just have a conversation with. There's so many. And I know it doesn't have to be sports. I'm going to go with, and I don't know why, because it's the first thing that comes to mind. I'll go with Paul Rudd. I don't know. I feel like we'd be good friends. I'd watch it. I watch everything he's in. I think he's super funny. The guy doesn't age for some reason. I don't know why. I got to get some of that.
Neither do you, though. Yeah, you don't age. You look like, you say, oh, I'm a little older. You look like you're 22 right now.
Well, I appreciate that. My knees say otherwise, and so does my back. But yeah, for some reason, I don't know. But yeah, Paul Rudd. Maybe because I watched I Love You Man recently. But I feel like he'd be a great interview.
Okay. Any final advice for people who want to be like you?
Yeah, I would say be in the moment. Don't be so worried about the future. Yes, you need to think about it, but don't be so caught up that you're not realizing the moment you're in. The time spent at Full Sail or in school or when you're paying your dues, quote unquote, will be some of the most fun times of your life. The relationships you build, the people you meet, the things you do, the stories you cover. Realize at that moment that people always talk about, oh man, those were good times. Realize that you're in the good times now and just kind of pay attention and just soak it up. Take the time to soak it up because there's going to be a time where you don't have time to do that. So while you can, be in the moment and soak it up.
Great insight. I want to thank Sherwin Shelton, my guest today, from behind the scenes at the Golden Arches to on your television, having people from DoorDash come by and say, wow, I just met a celebrity tonight. It's been fun to enjoy this time and reminisce with you, Sherwin. As for all the rest of you, keep on living the dream.